Alright, it's going.
I think it's on.
Cool.
Let me see how you look.
Like a fucking dog. Like
Yeah,
Don
that's
Juan.
yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, fantastic. You have your water here if you need it. You like Mr. Chimichanga? Just in case. Mr. Tape. Ready to do this thing?
Let's do it, baby. Yeah.
Let's do it. All right. Hello. Welcome to the Playroom. I'm still learning how to hold the audience perspective while holding these perspectives. So bear with us as we learn to hold space for what we're doing here, because I'm not used to speaking with a camera that's on, and I don't think you are.
I'm not either, but you know what? We're fools.
We're fools.
And we're here to be fools and we're here to play, so let's do it. Let's have some fun. And
That's what I needed, man. I was
bring
thinking
the
I should
energy,
wait too
you
fucking
know?
serious.
Come on.
All right.
Come on. It's just two guys on a couch with a camera.
Yes, sir.
Alright.
Yes, sir. I wanted to protocol speak. Alrighty.
Yeah.
So, I'm good. Should I introduce you?
Sure.
All right. So, since my earliest memories, you have populated them. You have been here with me. We were pretty much destined to be together because our sisters were friends before we were friends.
Mm-hmm.
So as we were kind of fetuses, we were already coming. Our timelines were already converging. And so we went, I think, from pre-K to, let's say, third grade, the end of third grade together.
Yeah.
And then we went to different schools, but always stayed in touch.
Mm-hmm.
And we're family friends, and would vacation together and ski together and these sorts of things. And always thought partners, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then started a company together. We had a robotic tattooing startup called Mirage, which we ran at the Habitat. Shout out all the Habitat homies. And then during COVID, we both started thinking about things a little deeper and started connecting over that even more. We lived in Montana together for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, for the past, I guess, 4 years, really, since COVID, there's been a kind of a spiritual journey that both of us have been on, and we've been, I think, a part of that for each other, as companions, as teachers, as showing each other different parts of ourselves and reflecting different things back. So, one of my dearest people, relationships in my whole life. So I'm so glad to have you here.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And it's, likewise, I just feel very grateful and blessed to have you on this journey with me, and for all the memories you've made and will continue to make.
Yes, sir.
And for, through the thick and the thin, and always being at each other's sides. So
Yes, sir.
I'm very grateful for that.
Do we have this one on as well? Or the voice memo? I was just thinking in terms of audio, it might be good.
Good call.
I know it breaks the container.
Hey, that's alright.
There we go.
Fantastic.
Okay. Fantastic. And then do you think you want to mention anything from your professional background or your skill background, or more the relationship is enough?
I think the relationship says it all. I think for those of you who already know me, there's nothing more that needs to be said. And for those of you who I've yet to meet, hopefully you'll know enough about me by the end of this to form your judgment. So I don't think there's any words I could say that I would want to swing you one way or the other.
Love that.
So yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I have some questions here, but those are more just I guess toys we can play with in the playroom and see where it takes us.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's only appropriate to give the listeners and watchers context. We just did a 4-minute eye gaze meditation where pretty much we just looked at each other, looked into each other's eyes for 4 minutes, and right off the bat, it was just hysterical laughter, and it was a great time, and it, you know, broke the ice, lightened the mood.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what we're here for, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah.
Yeah, that was something that spontaneously was happening at this Integral conference. Just when you would drop into a conversation with someone and they would be very present, and you realize, whoa, this is at a deeper level than a normal conversation where they're looking around, or it's more they're not holding the space as much.
Well, it's a bizarre thing because, especially I feel like in today's day and age, that tendency for eye contact is something that's been lost.
Yeah.
As social media has kind of gotten out of control, and as the age of the internet's really dawned on us, I feel like the younger generations are losing the capacity to really just like look at somebody's eyes and make that eye contact, and it's almost a lost art form, as weird as it is to say.
Yeah. Totally
yeah.
agree. Yeah, it's I think one of the scary things about where we're at right now, and also one of the things that's a really great catalyst for growth, is the fact that this is, I think, the first time in human history where you can really have interactions with other people and not have to participate. You know, you can kind of just passively watch other people interact,
right,
or be talked to in a really engaging way, or have a girl dance for you or something like this, in a way where you are kind of completely safe behind your phone, and you don't have to contribute anything.
Yeah, you can kind of be a part of the fun without actually like any cost.
Yeah.
But also no real benefit either. It's the empty calories.
Yeah,
you know?
the empty calories. Yeah. I think I noticed that on Halloween, this past Halloween, when we were at the Travis Scott show, and I was very aware of the fact that a lot of the kids who probably spent a lot of their formative years, you know, younger than us, maybe they're 16, 15, during COVID and some of these formative years, you know, they were kind of watching the concert like it was on their phone, or they would literally watch it through their phone, or even while they were in a mosh pit or doing something, they would be recording it as they're doing it, and like be looking at me through the phone. And I had to a couple of times be like, no, look at me, and like let's feel this together, let's like create a field here, as opposed to just doing it with this external thing, which is funny that we're reintroducing this external thing.
Seriously, that's the full circle.
That's the full circle.
The spiral. Hopefully it's upwards, could be downwards.
Could be downwards.
I felt that tremendously. Just, and really, I mean, it's why Burning Man has been such an amazing experience for me. Is that, and obviously Burning Man has so many different capacities to it that I love, but strictly from the music end. When I compare that to other festivals I've been to, Coachella or these other things, like everybody's there. There's no phones. It's just everybody's completely present, and everybody's just enjoying what the artist is offering, as opposed to thinking about how they could post this for their followers, or how they could just increase viewership, or all these other ideas that take away from that present moment. Yeah,
that's something I was actually just talking to Om about this the other day, as one of the reflections I've had while starting to do this, is that I feel like there's kind of a seesaw between tapping in to the, like, when I'm really present in the moment, it doesn't translate as well over the screen. Like if we're connecting really strongly, the viewer feels kind of left out, right? Whereas like if I'm focusing more on the camera, it's a weirder interaction between the two of us, but it's gonna look better on the other side. Like Mr. Beast, if you were to see Mr. Beast in public, you know, he doesn't care about you, he cares about the viewer on his camera, right? And so it's weird to see him in public, or to see a vlogger or something in public, because they're talking to someone else that's not here. And you know, if they were to put more attention on the people around them at that time, it wouldn't be as engaging to watch it digitally, which is, I think, what, like that, it's a kind of a weird seesaw, but I think there are ways, hopefully there are ways to integrate that and learn how to hold that perspective while holding this perspective. It's just not something I've fully developed the ability to do so.
Nor have I. And I honestly don't know what that looks like, so we're trying it out.
Yeah, I love that, what you did. I was coming in so serious, or I don't know, I take like, it's the magician in me. I don't know. I want to make things really like special, or like just really show that I'm taking it serious, or be intentional about it. But at the same time,
I think it's more caregiver than magician.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Because I think that's your way of showing care, showing love, is to, you know, walk somebody through a process, or really teach them, or really feel like you're engaging with them. Right.
Yeah. Well said. I have some of these questions here I just wrote before we got here. I think, and yeah, just throw them in the mix. Okay, yesterday, okay, yeah, how about, what if, I have a lot of questions about the journey, I have questions about people that have been helpful on the journey, about certain dynamics that have occurred on the journey, but maybe it would be helpful just to get a little bit of an overview of what that journey has looked like for you, maybe some of the big movements in it, and yeah, just telling your story a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole phrasing around like the journey,
Right.
it cracks me up because like the journey is such it's just like a nebulous idea that we don't really know. And so many times I've tried to put pen to paper, being like, what exactly is this journey?
Right.
And so many times I've come up blank, because it's ultimately just life, and there's no way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's fitting that I just describe what I've been doing recently, and we kind of take it from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think during COVID, when we were living together, I think really just, and this is a term that I wouldn't have been able to put to this experience until more recently, until I've become more learned in philosophy and understanding these concepts.
Mm-hmm.
But I had my first, or one of my first, I many in the past, but one very strong encounter with the absurd, right? And I think many people have this during COVID, right? The absurdity of all of this, the fact that we're living creatures, living beings confined to rooms, and in many ways had our own just like these external rules put on us that we were very clearly subject to and couldn't escape from, and couldn't live how we wanted to live on one level, and also from like the biological level of just like being out in nature, and like for a lot of people stuck in cities, like
Mm-hmm.
that's just not a lifestyle that's conducive towards humans.
Mm-hmm.
And so beginning in COVID and beginning with the exploration that you were doing in Montana, and living with you and Kevin in Montana, and kind of seeing over the course of college, just looking into the next steps and really questioning why. And this is really what started off for me, in the sense that a lot of job routes post grad just felt they didn't hold a lot of weight for me, because I wondered like what the point of it all was. Not in like a dire way at all initially, but yeah, just wondering like, okay, like, well, like if I'm going out into the world, I have this education, I studied engineering, my kind of belief was always like there's problems out there a lot, like let me get an education to figure out how to take a problem and solve it in the physical world. So I chose mechanical engineering as a route to do that. And so then coming up to graduation, I was like, all right, well, so then like what problems am I passionate about? Like what things does the world need me to solve? Where do I align? Where do my interests align? Like what's the right path for me? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a year to figure this out. And for me, the kind of question was a question that just needed more data. I needed more data points from the world to show me what resonated with me and what the right route was. And so to go about this, I said, all right, I've lived in the US my whole life. I've traveled abroad, but I've lived here my whole life. I in many ways like have lived in a bubble with growing up in Silicon Valley, going to Harvard, very specific types of people. And so I said, okay, I'm just gonna go to as many countries as I can, and just see how other people live and see these other lifestyles. And so in the ensuing 15 months, I spent time in 47 countries.
Wow.
Traveled.
Wow.
Yeah.
I forgot that.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Spent the summer in Southeast Asia.
Whoa.
The fall backpacking through Europe alone.
Mm-hmm.
The winter skiing in Japan with Kevin,
Mm-hmm.
and Jaden, and South Korea as well. And then the spring doing a survival course in Chilean Patagonia, learning how to live off the land and survive in a remote setting for 30 days with no contact to the outside world.
No phone, no music.
Nothing.
Nothing that
no
you didn't bring
technology
in with you, right?
Yeah, couldn't bring anything in, and you just had the clothes on your back, your kayak and your tent, and some dried quinoa and rice, to grom on.
The good stuff.
And before spending the summer in Africa and the Middle East, and so I went out and explored these different things, all while pushing myself in different capacities, right? So in Europe, I was alone. This was just like, what is life like when I'm in a foreign environment, but without my friends, without friends and family, without the people I care about? I can still contact them, I can still text them, but they're not here. In Japan, it was the question of, okay, what about if I'm in a place where, and Kevin and I took Japanese in high school, so where I'm just not even speaking my native tongue, right? Because when I'm in Europe, you can still speak English and get by that way. When I was in Japan, I was like, all right, like let's just speak Japanese and see where that gets us. And it got us into some heinous situations, but like that's all part of it.
Yeah.
And then in Patagonia, the question was rather, okay, like let me not only go away from my friends and family, and I went on this trip with Kevin, but we got there and they told us that there's actually 2 groups going out into the wilderness. And that we were on separate group. They just randomly assorted us different ways, and they were like, oh, do you guys know each other? Like, do you want to be on the same trip? And we kind of looked at each other and we're like, it's already been decided, it's the fates chose for us. And so we went off separately, and so going off on that trip with, without friends, without family, without any way to contact them, and then with no, modern luxuries, none of the comforts that we so readily rely on in our day-to-day. And through this whole year, really 15 months, I learned so much about myself, about the broader world, about just how we live, what it means to be human. But in many ways, and we can talk more about this. I'll sum out the next year, and then we can kind of jump back in as we want.
Great.
I realized kind of at the end of this year, as I was like, all right, like I should probably get back into real life, or start rejoining society in that capacity, that no amount of searching outside will let you understand yourself. And I thought that just having more data points as to what the world offered and like what I would resonate with, it helped, but it didn't touch the nagging question of why, right? Because universally across most countries, it still exists. And
you mean that question?
That question of why, and just how culturally how people deal with it is different. And that's where I was kind of like, okay, well, I actually need to learn how people have evaluated this question, because it kind of hit me like, wait a minute. Like, I thought I could solve this just by my experiences.
Right.
There are so many people throughout history that have actually attacked this question head on, and that's kind of what religion is.
Right.
And so from that point, I said, wait a minute, I've missed a big segment of this, which is A, internal conversations with myself, and B, learning from philosophers, theologians,
prophets,
shamans, psychologists, all of these various people that have committed their lives or parts of their lives to understanding and grappling with this question. And that led me to spending the fall and winter in Montana, isolated, and really getting into my meditation practice, just doing a deep dive on what I just mentioned: psychology, comparative theology, philosophy, and just understanding kind of my basis for living and why life is beautiful for myself, such that when these questions come across my line of sight, I feel like I have a solid basis to attack them.
Yeah, that was really well said. I think that's a nice arc too, like the first year being kind of an outward exploration and kind of an embodied, you know, out in the world collective exploration, and then the last year being more of an inward, internal, spiritual exploration more than, or of the inner world and the inner places as opposed to the outer places. Who in that inner journey, who were some guides for you? You know, the Virgils to your Dante and the Inferno.
It's funny, Virgil has actually been a guide.
Really?
Yeah, I say a poem by Virgil actually every night when I go to bed.
Really?
Yeah.
Would you like to
when I
share
close
that,
my eyes, I say, I have lived, I have completed now the course that fortune long ago allotted me. And what it means to say is that in a reassuring way, this could be the end. I've done it. My life, everything in my life has led me to this point. Everything in my life, and I used it as an opportunity to reflect on my day. And it's a reminder that even the most minute interaction, right? Even like doing this, right? It took 20 years of our relationship to get to this point. And it took your whole, everything you went through to go on this journey, to drop out of Stanford, to go through all these arcs, to put you here. Everything that I've been through put me right here.
Right.
And even just acknowledging the simplest things in your day and the gravity that the whole force and the whole storm and the maelstrom that life took to just have you get that sandwich or have you just do something. It's a really beautiful mode of gratitude for me.
Yeah. It's a beautiful way to reframe mundanity, I think.
Yeah.
You know, and be like, it's not just getting a sandwich, like how many processes had to happen for how interdependent are we? Right? Like
not only our past, but on everybody around us.
Yeah. Some guy like on some summer day was like, I want to open up a sandwich shop, and his, you know, and like, and that he's part of some lineage, and the food was grown in some place that has a lineage, and everything has lineages that are leading up to the moment.
And there's a profound beauty to it, because even the most mundane thing all of a sudden has all this depth that you otherwise wouldn't attribute to it, because it took somebody's life, and life is really the deepest thing, because they're giving their time to bring you to that point.
Yeah.
But to get back to your question,
yes,
I think I'll separate it into two.
Okay.
One will be scholars that I've engaged with, that's just through just reading, that have really shaped my thought and my experience. Second is just kind of the people that have sat on my shoulder and given me advice, and
I love those.
And you are certainly one of them. My sister Danielle is certainly one of them. Honestly, my whole family, just in their support of me, and offering, you know, their different perspectives, and in many ways have been really my greatest teachers. I've always attributed a lot of my stance on life and personal philosophy to my grandfather, my mom's dad, who grew up in the Great Depression. His parents were chiropractors, opened a business, were like very beloved in their community. Business didn't go well, obviously, during the Depression, so mom had to move away to become a teacher. Dad moved away to work on the docks in Alaska.
Whoa. Got
injured working in the docks. Ended up in kind of life support for the rest of his life. So my grandfather worked during school, worked his way through school, supporting his siblings, supporting his father.
Wow.
And as soon as school ended and he finally, you know, was free to go make the most of his life and go, you know, take life by the horns, World War II broke out.
Wow.
And he didn't wait a second, went immediately to the Naval Enlistment Office and signed up. And he said, I don't even want to take the chance of not getting drafted. Like, I need to fight for what matters.
Wow.
Fought in the war and
Thank you, man.
and served his country, and then came back and worked for Boeing, and he was a kind man, and he taught me what it meant to be gentle and masculine at the same time, right? And I think for me, that voice always sits very strongly no matter what it is I do. And so on this exploration, right, exploring completely new realms of thought, his voice of like, even if I'm gonna go into the darkness or explore like a really dark concept or think about, you know, the existential nature of life, or dive into books on nihilism and like really, you know, get into the, you know, why does life matter stuff, I have him on my shoulder being like, you still treat, you know, the mailman with a smile and a hug and a warm and just a warm welcome, because your integrity and your loyalty, no matter what you're going through, is what shines through.
Right. That's that healthy level 3 or that healthy esteem structure.
Yeah.
You know, like no matter how deep we go into the underworld or how high we try and reach into heaven, there needs to be a floor. There needs to be a ground of just common decency and respect. You know, here.
Just here, and treating people with that. And so that was a really fundamental basis for me. I think when I started really diving into these questions, my sister and I will send quotes back and forth, and she sent me a quote by Carl Jung, who ended up being a huge influence on me. She sent me a quote saying, and this is how I got introduced to him, because she sent me this quote. It says, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, hopefully it's not too bad, but until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. And for me, this really it prompted a complete change in how I was looking at things, because I was like, wait a minute, like, what is this, first of all, and what does he have to tell me, but also like, where does this aspect of fate play into things? And it prompted me towards you know, reading his works, and I think while I was reading him, I had the Stoics going at the same time, who I've loved and have loved for some time, but I had never previously read Epictetus or Seneca, or, you know, the Proverbs of Zeno, and those have been really amazing amazing aids for me along the way. So those have kind of been the constants.
It's a good day when I get a text review that's from Jung or from the Stoics, and it always comes at an amazing time and just gives me something to chew on and something to think about. And even just the poetry of it is beautiful. Just people, you know, these days it's so wonderful, all the things we've gotten from postmodernism, and one of the things that's a little bit challenging is sometimes we don't take life too seriously, and we just, you know, we don't, you know, our dress is casual, our language is casual, you know, and there is something to be said for the pomp and circumstance of, you know, a ceremony. And I think sometimes when there's a beautiful quote with beautiful language that someone's kind of poured attention into to try and craft a like beautiful version of this idea, it feels like a mini ceremony or a mini mantra, and it hits in a different way. It's almost like a spell, as opposed to just like a, you know, life's crazy, man, like, you know, like, until you know, like, your unconscious desires, like, you're never gonna, like, be free. Like, it's very different than, you know, saying it in a really beautiful way. And so I appreciate that little reintroduction of, you know, what is traditionally a mythic format, or you know, from that traditional time in human history, a kind of pre-modern time in human history, where we cared more about these kind of mythic structures. I think you really tapped into that, and I get a nice dose of that from you always, and I appreciate that.
It's, I mean, in many ways, it's really something that I wasn't able to harness at all until this year. I was never a movie kid growing up.
Really?
I probably some of the worst like pop culture knowledge of all time. Aside from Star Wars. Everything Star Wars. Everything Star Wars. Every form of content Star Wars. But like in general, I was just with Kevin the other day going through like the IMDb top 100, and he was just like, yeah, like, you should watch this one. And we went through the whole thing, and like of the top 100, he recommended like 80 of them.
Right.
And I was
He's the pop culture.
And he's the pop culture guy, but I was like, I haven't seen any. I hadn't seen Titanic. I hadn't seen Matrix. I hadn't seen. I just watched Inception. I hadn't seen any of these things.
You're gonna fucking love Matrix, dude.
But what this year's really brought me is a profound care and just understanding for the depth of art.
Yeah.
And
Dune was big this year.
And just movies and music, and it's all hitting at a different level because I see for the first time the spiritual burden that these art forms take. And in the same way, like I couldn't have possibly had any
the spiritual burden the art form takes, or the creator takes in, or what do you mean by that?
I mean that the burden that the creator carries to produce such a form of art, right? Yeah. And even if you look at abstract expressionism, right? It's not to a purely logical mind, to a purely 6 and 3 mind. You're like, dude, this is a blank canvas that some guy just literally just like threw paint on. Right. Why is this significant?
From a modernist perspective, it's not technical. It's not pushing the art form. It's not pushing the art form. Something we haven't done before.
Exactly.
It's not interesting from a modernist perspective. But from a postmodernist
perspective, you say, whoa, what did it take to get to this point? Mm-hmm. And then you start looking into the historical basis of it, coming out of the Cold War.
That's right.
And out of just people pushing back against the norm, saying, okay, wait, what's actually like the most obnoxious, what's the most obtrusive, what's the most rebellious art form we can have, one that's actually not rooted in a lot of
narrative at all, in any sort of
in that there's this profound beauty, and then going into the artist's stories and how they got to their moments and what they had to go through to get to those moments. It's something I never would have been able to pick up on without the arc that I've gone on, especially because I'm a trained engineer. Like I think about these things. I tend to think about these things like sequentially. Right. And I think the irony of it is that that sequential form of thought that said, okay, I'm done with college. What is the optimal path for me? It's a very logical frame. Like, I need to find this bright next step. Right. And it actually it led me to not abandon that viewpoint, but seek out a different understanding, and it gave me this different understanding that doesn't rely on traditional logic and sequence at all. So it's cool to be able to tap back into that and juggle them both. But
well said. It's interesting how the healthy form of each previous level or drive leads to its own annihilation in some sense. Yeah. Like the if you want to say that the traditional drive is the drive to basically be in alignment with the universe that is kind of pre-given, right? This idea in like mythic religion is like like God made the universe, or someone came and made the universe. We have a prophet who talked with him and kind of understood how it works, and we want to live in accordance with what that prophet said, and it's kind of eternally true, and we want to stay in that harmony with the universe. And then you have people like Newton and Galileo and these guys coming along and saying, whoa, we're finding out new stuff, like stuff that isn't in the book, stuff that wasn't understood before. Seems like there are some laws of nature that we can actually discover that aren't just pre-given. But in some sense, you could actually see that as trying to meet the same goal in a way of trying to be in harmony with the universe, but actually just realizing that maybe it's not just reading from the book, but there's a deeper way to get in touch with the harmony of the universe, which is technological, and that's actually bringing God's kingdom down here on earth or something like this. And there's these kind of things. And another voice in my head is saying, well, it's also a fundamentally different thing. But at least for me, I think part of the achiever drive or the modernist drive is what took me into trying to get into deeper states of awareness or empathy or things like this. Because it's like, oh, I'm self-improving. I'm becoming a better person. But using that drive, it almost self-terminates at some point.
It has to. And that's the dangerous point in the journey. Right? Yeah. Because that's when your former self or that former perspective is looking at itself being like, wait a minute, does this make sense anymore? And the underlying truths that you thought that were
Right.
the basis of
That got you here. Don't work anymore.
don't really work anymore,
Yeah.
and you pull them out and the whole house crumbles.
Right.
But then, it takes some time to realize that those truths weren't actually necessary, or those ideas weren't actually necessary for the house to stand. And
Right.
that you can rebuild it all the same. All your skills and attributes and relationships are still there.
Right.
Your perspective has just changed a little bit.
Totally.
And so I think it needs to self-terminate.
Yeah.
And what Jung says is that moment of termination is the beginning of the individuation process, which is his terminology for the journey that we talk about.
Right. Yeah, it's a good that I think of that moment earlier where you said, what is the journey? And kind of what came to me is like, well, there's a place that kind of the conveyor belt of culture can get you to, right? And I think the journey is the place after that conveyor belt. It's kind of the wilds, right? It's like from child to like adulthood, this society can kind of train you up into being like a well-adjusted, modern, person. It can kind of get you to what we would consider a postmodern perspective. Certainly our colleges that we went to are deeply entrenched with the postmodern perspective and are very excited about teaching people ideas of diversity, equity, inclusion, and being able to take different viewpoints that are non-reducible or complementary or comparable.
Yeah.
And certainly culture at large seems to be able to get you to at least some sort of a place of conformity or entrepreneurial drive, which we would consider the esteem drive being dominant. Level 3 seems like some institutions that are around today can get you to level 4, but what's after that, right? And what does it actually look like to embody some of these postmodern realizations in your actual life? It's one thing to get it cognitively, and it's another thing to be like, wait, if I really take the postmodern stuff to be true, maybe it kind of nullifies the idea of Harvard or Stanford or any of these things themselves. And in that sense, it's kind of like there's a cliff kind of waiting for you there.
Yeah.
So you start asking those questions. And I think both you and I have had the experience of going off the cliff.
Yeah.
And then at some point you start, building a new glider for yourself in the air.
Or you realize you just bounce. You hit the ground and it sucks.
Yeah.
But then you realize you bounce and you're like, wait a minute, I'm actually still kind of chooching.
Right.
I'm still moving.
Right.
And
you do hit the ground.
And it's, I think, a really beautiful thing. And it's a testament to our human resilience.
Right.
And our willingness to get back up and keep pushing and learning. And face a lot of these difficult questions head on.
Yeah.
Because suppressing them isn't going to do you any good.
Right.
And so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hitting the ground is a great way to put it. I think, like for me, when you say that, I almost think of it as like hitting the lowest chakra, or hitting the lowest level of mind, which is kind of survival mind. And I think, deep topic, but some people do get to suicide or thoughts of suicide or survival. They start questioning the value of survival itself when you go down the postmodern route far enough, or the nihilistic route far enough, right?
Yeah.
You start to question, well, why are we doing this whole rigmarole anyways?
Yeah.
Right? If nothing is true and no perspective is valid. Yeah. But then if you pass that, if you decide, well, I'm going to stay, right? You have to kind of, you meet Camus or you meet Sartre at the door, right? And then if you decide to stay in the game, I think then you say, okay, well, I still need to eat. I enjoy it when I have friends around. It seems that there are some of these layers that I can get to, and we start to build back up. And then you kind of face the old demon, which is, what do we do about these multiple perspectives?
But you have a stronger base.
But you have a stronger base.
You're not just going to fall through. And I think
said.
That's something that has really hit me pretty strongly this year. Because again, this year was the first time I really came across those questions of like, why does it matter? And they're terrifying to come across.
Yep.
And I had no idea, and I would consider myself relatively well educated.
Right.
I had no idea that like existentialist perspectives were like a thing. and by the grace of God, I through my reading and through a dear friend who recommended a series of books. He was a philosophy major.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, you should check out existentialists, like they're interesting. And so I, flipped open Jean-Paul Sartre, and I was like, wait a minute, he's saying something here. Flipped open Camus, flipped open Sylvia Plath, these different authors who actually deal with it.
Yeah.
And it was like, whoa, like this idea of like nothing mattering isn't this like taboo subject that like everybody is just scared of talking about. Like there's actually people who've talked about this stuff.
Yeah.
And in reading that, it validated me for feeling those things. Because initially when I'm feeling like, why does this matter? I'm not only feeling that, but I'm angry at myself for feeling that. And so it's this double whammy of like, what's wrong with me for feeling this way? Being introduced to people who have thought about this was like, wait a minute, like this is actually like a pretty rational conclusion to come to.
Yeah. And
given this, then what are they saying? And that's where there's some really cool perspectives that stem off of that, right? Where you say, okay, like that's in many ways the most human thing you can do is care, given the fact that it doesn't matter. The most human thing you can do is still give a fuck when the world's punching you. And or the Christian religious perspective that Kierkegaard proposes. He says that given the absurd, therefore, the fact that we don't know tells us that God knows, tells us that a higher power knows. And so he takes the religious leap from that stance.
There's something beyond us.
There's something because we don't know. If we knew everything, there wouldn't be something beyond. But because we don't know, that's where religion comes in, and there is something.
There is a mystery.
He treats that as the proof that God exists.
Right.
And so from this base, the floor, the ground where you're gonna fall, and where people say don't go there, don't even think about that,
because you won't get up.
Because you won't get up.
Right.
Like just by trusting your resilience and trusting the people around you to lift you up, and trusting seeing these scholars' thoughts all the way through. And granted, some of these scholars did kill themselves.
Totally.
Sylvia Plath wrote this beautiful book about dealing with existential dread, and ended it up kind of on a high note, and then wound up taking her own life a couple years later. And so I think just like being aware is so essential, and not just like shoving things under the bed because we don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's where it really comes back to bite you. Because if the thought pops up at any point, then you're gonna have to deal with it. And like my kind of stance is like, just hit me with it now. Like let me learn, and let me be a fool and allow this to teach me, because if I'm not going to deal with it now, I'm going to have to deal with it at some point.
Right. On its terms and not
on
mine.
its terms, not on mine.
Right.
Right. But it's taken going through that progression, and then also being like, wait a minute, I don't have to like do all of this now.
Right.
Right. And that's where from Dune, one of my favorite quotes is that the mystery of life isn't a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. And it's just kind of simple as that like all the things we're talking about are beautiful in themselves, but like there isn't an end goal in solving all of this. It's an end goal in just experiencing it to the best of our ability, and finding a basis for our happiness and for our contentment and for feeling real grief and sadness and sorrow, and being able to accumulate that into a well-lived life.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. I have a question. Very well said. I have a question on kind of how you, I guess, picked yourself up off the floor. I mean, that is kind of what you were talking about, but if you think there are a couple things or practices or mindsets that you can distill of like things that have kind of helped you get out of that place. I know the Fool and the Fisher King myth might be kind of a part of that. And I guess just to preface that, for those who are less familiar with the terminology of what we're talking about, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but the idea is that culture has kind of certain things that it takes to be obviously true, right? And culture has these layers in it. There were, indigenous cultures that lived in harmony with Earth. After we stopped doing that, we started coming into agricultural societies and civilizations. we usually call these traditional societies that have some sort of a code or some sort of a law or some sort of a book that they follow and believe is absolutely true. Then you then have modern societies after the Industrial Revolution and the Enlightenment, and these societies believe in technological progress, in some sort of a direction to the universe, right? Previous pre-modern worldviews tend to be cyclical, trying to get in line with the harmony of things that are kind of ever present, kind of circular, whereas modernity has a telos or a direction. It sees there as being new things that have happened. It's not all just the same, and that our goal is to continue the birthing of this new thing. And that is, you would say the dominant philosophy of Silicon Valley, trying to always create the next thing, the next intelligence, the next this. Postmodernity is where this is questioned and challenged, right? Arising after the Second World War, postmodernity says, seems like these narratives have left a lot of people out. Seems like progress is only maybe one thing that's happening here, but seems like it's a certain set of people defining what progress is and the hierarchy of that looks like, and they put themselves, the white man, technological man at the top of that, and have destroyed, traditional cultures, indigenous cultures, destroyed a lot of meaning and the lifestyles and rich heritage of so many cultures by just imposing this modernist view on it. And so we want to actually recognize all perspectives. We want to recognize these previous worldviews. We also, and if someone believes in traditional religion, we want them to be able to practice freely, right? If someone has indigenous spiritual beliefs, we want those to be allowed. If someone's a modernist, we understand that, but they also can't impose their values on other people. And we want everyone to have a seat at the table. That's kind of its healthy form. In its unhealthy form, the idea is that there's no fundamental truth. Nothing is real. Nothing has any meaning at all. That's one of the ways you can take that line of thinking. And that's kind of the floor we're talking about, is when you start to question, like, you start to question modernity, you start to question humans' ability to create accurate maps of knowledge in general, which happens because of this postmodern perspective, which basically understands so much of our reality is constructed by our language. It's constructed by cultural norms that are distinct from place to place, and we can look at different cultures and see the same human being doing very different things depending on even the words they use or the concepts they have around something. So it seems like linguistics are shaping a lot more of reality than there isn't a reality to be found like science believes. Right? Science believes that the scientific method is an accurate and final test for what is true in the universe. Postmodernism critiques this and says, well, it's one method of inquiry that can see one type of phenomena, but there are other phenomena that it can't see, namely subjective experience, namely the value of things, right? It doesn't care about the value of things, it only cares about the mechanism, and that can be a problem. So we need to have different disciplines that care about the humanities, that care about science, and these things can't really talk to each other. Whereas in modernity, you have a natural philosopher like Newton, and he's making claims about religion. They're making claims, Darwin or the evolutionary guys are also making ethical claims and saying how we should do politics. In postmodernism, you say, these are different fields of inquiry, and you want to use different methods to understand different phenomena. There are problems with that, and that's what kind of Integral is trying to solve. And we need some large map that we can actually unite ourselves as a society. Anyways, all this is to say, I think what you were describing sounds to me like kind of going into that place of postmodern questioning and recognizing the arbitrariness of these different perspectives, the value of different perspectives, number one, and then by recognizing that all have value, that kind of confusion of, well, then which one is true, or is there anything that's true at all? What's the point of this whole thing? And that being the floor. And so what are some ways that you found your way out of that kind of postmodern trap?
Yeah, man, it's a loaded question.
Very simply, how'd you fix the thing that our culture has been dealing with?
I think one aspect of it is just, they say that all wounds are healed with time, and there's an incredible and an immense fear when you come across these concepts for the first time, because you begin questioning everything in your life in the way you saw it previously shatters. And it's in that moment of fear where often despair is greatest. And through simply making it through that day, through simply breathing and eating and doing the basic functions, going back down to the lower levels, making it through the day and being able to wake up the next day and say, you know what, I'm still here. Let's do something about it. I think.
So like routines,
Yeah. So something that the routines that really help me are I take a cold shower every morning.
Yep.
I sit for a meditation using solfeggio frequencies. When I was in Montana, I was doing I was really into the practice, so I was doing 1 to 2 hours a day.
Yep.
Now that I've scaled back and have other things going on, I'll just commit 20 to 40 minutes in the morning, typically just 20, and if I need to 10, and if I need to none.
Right.
And just treating it however I need to. But and then during when I was really learning these different perspectives and needed routine, I think a really important piece of it is just doing something for yourself. And for me, in the time when I was in Montana, that was cooking.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would cook all of my meals, and that was just a time that was me showing love to myself. It was saying, I'm gonna put in time to make future Cole a fire meal. And in that time too, I put my phone away, and I would just kind of push the outside world away and say, I'm gonna give love to myself. And I think that it's one of those things that's when you're in that habit, it's very, reaffirming. It's once you're out of it that it gets hard to restart, and I think that's where the floor really lies.
Totally.
What Jung says is, and a quote of his that I like is, the deepest hell is when you realize heaven is hell, and when you realize hell is a certain form of heaven.
Break that down.
What I mean by that is, and I think what Jung meant by that is that and what put me on this journey was striving to find the right path, striving to find what was good, what was true, right. what was best.
Culture doesn't have the answer. I'm gonna find the answer.
Culture doesn't have the answer. I'm gonna find the answer.
But there is an answer.
But there is an answer. And as I bashed my head against the wall of not finding the answer and being pissed about it and being angry and being sad and frustrated, and then touching on these existentialist themes and being like, oh fuck, like nothing matters,
mm-hmm.
then that despair is incredible. And it was the first moment where I was just like in that hell of like not, and this can kind of jump into the Joseph Campbell, like heaven and hell are symbolic and comparative theology perspective, but
mm-hmm.
To stay on this track, it's that place is super dark, and all you want to do is claw your way out of that through some logical lens of, no, actually this is why it matters, this is why I'm going to do anything.
You're trying to go back to taking a specific perspective.
Exactly, but with some new nugget of knowledge that it's a gnat in your ear,
arbitrary.
You can't get away, that it's arbitrary. And so there's no way to escape from the same route you came in, right? The level of consciousness to which you need to solve a problem must be higher than the problem that it was generated.
Right. Or the perspective that generated
the perspective that generated the problem will not solve the problem. You
right.
need a higher level of consciousness to solve that problem.
That's right.
And so realizing while I was in that through the help of scholars, through the help of friends, that it's okay for me to feel that way, right?
Other people have felt this.
Other people have felt this. Other people have thought about this. There's people out there that have been through this, and further than that, beginning to understand. And this is something I knew from a just like logical level,
mm-hmm.
but had never felt. That understanding that these negative feelings too are part of life. and what Jung is getting at by saying the deepest form of hell is realizing that heaven is hell, is getting to that point initially where you understand that these feelings aren't something that can be abstracted away. And that's brutal because it's your previous worldview, because you're still in that sense of like, I need to solve these problems, I need to figure out how I can find ultimate happiness. And then with the competing like underlying basis of being like, but by the way, nothing matters. And so it like logically just doesn't compute. And so that's it, for me, that was the deepest point, because it was like, where do I go from here? Like, my perspective means nothing. Like this is that deepest point of hell. And that realization was just, it was world shattering. And it took me just like time and sitting with it and really just reminding myself that it's important to feel this way. And it's important, your body's telling you something and your mind's telling you something, and letting it teach you. Bringing it back to what you mentioned, the Fisher King wound. There's something that was introduced to me by you, by Jung, by Joseph Campbell.
The big homie.
Is the big homie is the idea that I mean, it's the same thing, that like a picture is 1,000 words, right? In stories, you can learn so much about just human nature in general, and stories that are intrinsic to human nature, ones that are tales as old as time, right? Generate archetypes. They generate classical characters that reappear in different spheres of history.
Right.
And so,
or maybe these stories are just the interaction between these.
They're just yeah, exactly. And that the archetypes are age old, and that the stories are just them mingling in different ways.
Right. Different trajectories, arcs, dynamics that
are
patterns.
Exactly. And so where I found a lot of understanding and insight was through one of these myths from I think it's the 12th century England. It's kind of where it derives. But it's called the Fisher King wound myth. And it was actually introduced to me by you, not knowingly, because you sent me a video on the Fool archetype, and I was watching that, and then there's a quote in that from this book, and I was like, that's kind of a cool quote, let me read this book. And essentially, and again, I'm gonna paraphrase this, so apologies, read it on your own, it was fantastic for me. There is a fool named Parsifal, and there's a king who's called the Fisher King. And this fool, he doesn't know he's a fool, but he's a fool. as the fool is. He's a young boy. And his whole life, he's been raised by his mother, who doesn't want him to see the world. And slowly he kind of gets the yearning to go out and explore. And he goes out and goes into the world and meets this man who's fishing on a lake. And he says, do you know where the nearest inn is? And the man says, just up the road on the left. And so he says, okay. And he walks, and there's a huge castle. And the man who was fishing was actually the king, the Fisher King, because he was fishing. And the fool goes into this castle and says, wow, what a beautiful feast. And before this, there's a wise man that the fool met that said, when you enter the castle, the Fisher King, ask him, who does the Grail serve? And so the fool knows this.
Okay.
And he's there, and in this castle is the Holy Grail that the Fisher King is protecting. And every night there's a procession of ladies and jesters and the whole medieval deal, drinking from the Grail and getting their greatest wishes. But the Fisher King can't drink from this Grail.
Love it.
For reason being, the Fisher King, when he was a boy, was out exploring and came across, he was very hungry and came across salmon, like a salmon roasting over a fire in an empty town. And he tasted the salmon, it was too hot for his mouth, spit it out, and this was the wound that has rendered him too sick to live, but too healthy to die. And so he just sits in this limbo where he's protecting this grail, but can't drink from it, can't do anything about it, and is just watching everybody around him drink and have a good time, but he can't do anything. So he's wounded. The fool comes in, he doesn't say what he's supposed to say. He leaves. And as he leaves, he goes back kind of on his quest to become a knight. And over the course of this quest, he conquers, he battles a bunch of knights, and once he defeats them, puts them in service of the king. And he goes through this whole regalia of trials and tribulations, all in search of this castle again. But it's not there for him, it's not available to him. And finally, through putting enough, going through enough struggle, pretty much, he sees the Fisher King again. And he says, yep, like right up the road on the left. And so he goes to the castle, and he finally asks the Fisher King, whom does the Grail serve? And upon hearing these words, the king says, oh, it serves the Grail King. It serves me and it serves the Grail King, i.e., I can drink from this. Like, wait a minute, like, why am I sitting in this misery? The fool needed to come in to offer a different perspective. Mm-hmm. The fool needed to come in to tell the guy sitting in the dark that it's not that deep. Your struggles aren't that, like, just drink from the Grail. Like, it's right here. It'll make you happy. Like, just go for it.
Right.
And that's kind of the perspective that in many ways has served as a beautiful reframe for me, is that, like, when you're in these dark places where you're like, why does this matter?
Who does the Grail Cup serve?
What's the point of it?
Right? Who does the multiple perspectives serve?
Exactly. Like, why am I, like, what does this perspective even serve? And it's like, wait, like, let me just be a fool. Like, let me just have fun. Like, why isn't it okay for me to have fun right now? Why am I being so hard on myself? Why am I being so serious? Like, why so serious?
Right.
And there's so many other, what I love about this myth is there's so many other aspects to it that are really important towards classifying the journey, right? So the fish that he eats, the fish is a symbol for Christ. And so
these homies were very Christian.
Yeah, they're very Christian. The wound that he gains is having a religious encounter before you're capable of understanding it. And in many ways, that's what coming in touch with existentialism, absurdism, asking why before you have the resources to answer the question, and it wounds you and it makes you want to stay away from that question.
That's a great metaphor.
And what it serves is it's the wounded feeling function. So we have thoughts and we have feelings, and in this society, especially for guys, we're so prone towards thoughts away from feelings.
The whole society is.
The whole society is. And how it manifested for me, like I just, due to circumstances in my life, I always said, like, I'm gonna be fine, it's okay, like a very warrior mindset of, like, don't worry about me, burn the ships, like, I'll survive. In that mentality, I lost complete touch of, like, what I wanted and what I was feeling and what was important to me. And it was this wounded feeling function. His mama. And so I had worked, without knowing this myth, all through, this past year of reintegrating mama and getting back in touch with my feelings and desires and wants and all of that, without kind of the final key element of, like, the fool needs to allow you permission to then go out and then and really just go out back into the world and say, it's not that deep, like, you don't have to care about what I did, you don't have to care about this journey I've been on. I'm just trying. We're all just trying, And so it's a beautiful gift in that dark place to just say, fuck it.
Yeah.
Let's just try, and then start that upward spiral.
Right. Yeah. That so well said. And I was familiar with parts of the Fisher King myth, but I loved hearing the full thing, and just how it relates to your journey. I thought that was beautiful. And that question is going to stick with me, that who does the Grail serve?
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things, and this can also happen in profound state experiences, of having like, disillusion, or even in psychedelic experiences, like losing a sense of self, or of, realizing, because I think for a lot of people, maybe the place that they've had an experience like that, of everything being kind of a joke, or being aperspectival, like the perspectives is kind of just being absurd and arbitrary, is in psychedelic experiences. That can happen where you're like, oh, all of this is constructed. Why are we playing these silly games and these stupid little rules? And oh, this guy's in his own little world, and this guy's in his own little world, and everyone's kind of missing the picture here. And it can go really far when you dissolve a sense of self entirely. But
I think it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like it happens frequently in psychedelic experiences, because that forces you into a higher state, right? The same thing happens in a sober mindset.
Totally.
But we just forget that right, like part of the setting when doing psychedelics is that that whatever comes, you just like lean into it, right? You're not supposed to resist.
Surrender to it.
You surrender to it. You're not supposed to resist it. You're not supposed to force it to your will.
Right.
That's like a known, common setting tip.
Yep.
It's the same thing in life. It's the same thing, at least in my understanding, my little understanding, in a tiny, insignificant understanding. That's in many ways what helps you get out of these dark places as well, where you're not sure what to do, you're not sure where to go, you're not sure who you are, and instead of forcing yourself to make a decision based on that, or forcing yourself in a certain avenue, instead just leaning into it and being like, I don't know, so teach me, so let me be a fool, so let me learn. So it's the same thing. And I think that's a beautiful thing about intentionality that you can bring into your everyday moments that you might just save for a trip, or maybe you're saving it for a special occasion. Like, no, like just take those same mentalities to everything you do.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think psychedelic experience, to me, I think why it's so valuable is because it's just kind of an upregulated version of normal life.
Yeah.
Like, you become aware of things, but I don't think the things you're becoming aware of are like fake or generated. I'm becoming aware of things that are always here. I'm just seeing them at a much higher volume.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see as the experience wears off that these things just start to lose volume, and then you return back to what the shamans will call like Middle Earth, or the middle world, right? But there's this ramping up where you become open to what's going on in the underworld, which you could consider the subconscious, and what's going on in the upper world, which you could consider the superconscious, and the subconscious, like we said, stuff that's going on within you that's driving your behavior becomes more visible, and potentially the karmic currents that you're swimming in, that transcend linear time, are also becoming apparent. Maybe you're seeing the archetypical dynamics of the various things that are happening or arising within yourself, and you can kind of see the trajectories of those things. But those aren't things that are not real right now. They're just things that are very hard to hold in awareness right
context,
now. And you can do things in daily life to expand your ability to hold those perspectives moment to moment. But I think life is a trip.
Yeah.
Right? Life is this emotional roller coaster, and these things come up. It's just a trip is a time when you're much more sensitive to it and could start to become comfortable with some of those things because you see them coming from miles away. Whereas in daily life, you have blinders on, and out of nowhere, this thing comes into your vision. You say, where the hell did that come from?
Yeah.
It's like, well, it's been coming at you in your subconscious for 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you had like taken off the blinder, you would have seen it coming.
Yeah.
Or even the karmic current. It's like, oh, this is something that is endemic on my path, or this is an archetypical pattern that I'm trying to break.
Yeah.
Right. And you can see that coming from a long way off. But in your life, you say, why am I keep getting with these sorts of partners, or why do I keep feeling this call to this other thing? I don't know what it is. And so, that moment of saying, I surrender, I yield. Like, this perspective yields, this ego yields. What do you have to show me, and what do you have to teach me? Is so powerful. And that question, who does the Grail serve, I think is a great moment to be like, to tactically generate an ego again, in the sense of being like, oh right, I did this for my own growth, I did this for my own evolution, like there's a person here, because sometimes the mind can get like non-personal. You can think you're seeing things objectively, or you can think that, oh, I'm not seeing this from a human perspective or from Cole's perspective, I'm just seeing this as it is, right? And that's the kind of the modern myth, right? Like math is like fundamentally true. It doesn't matter who looks at it, you rederive it every time. You know, this idea that there are perspectives that are eternal, and there's that moment where you realize, wait, who does the Creator serve? Oh, the viewer is always a participant in the experiment, right? We've seen this at the quantum scale now, which just hasn't been integrated into culture, but as you observing something creates it, right? So who is this questioning serving? Who is this perspective taking serving? Oh, it's this Cole guy, and this Cole guy has been, or this Ari guy has been locked in this room for 10 days in the dark, you know, sleeping nocturnally. Maybe this Ari guy could use a little bit of sunshine and water and food, and maybe see a friend and not talk about the end of the universe, and maybe that would do something good for the Ari guy. And then it's like, it's really that simple.
It's that simple.
And that's kind of the wisdom, I think, in that Fisher King.
I think it is, and I think it's just, it's so easy to get caught up in your own little reality, and just to kind of go through the day-to-day motions. And this is where Buddhism's been really impactful to me, and meditation's been really impactful, because it encourages you to separate sensation with your response, right? And so like, so frequently we're just on autopilot. Like, we see the barista and we say, hi, how are you? She says, good, how are you? You say, good, let me get a coffee. And then you get your coffee and you're like, you don't even remember if you talked, like, if you said anything. Like, it's just like, nothing actually happened.
It's your receptionist meeting her receptionist.
Yeah, right? Two projections, like, just talking.
The boss is in the back.
And the boss is in the back just counting, shuffling cars. Just,
literally.
And so, having the ability to see what your projection is doing and be like, wait a minute, why am I doing that? And the crazy thing is, and something that I've had to learn over and over and get smacked on the head, and I think it's part of it, is that the ego will always come in from different angles. And even the being like really down bad, like wondering the existential dread of the universe is an ego. Because it's saying that, I need to know, like, it's about me, I need to understand. And so even though you may have dissolved a different ego,
and I can understand,
a different one comes in, and so just being, and at the end of the day, that's just the dance of life. Yeah. Right. That's just what it is. And so it's just about creating these habits that allow you to continuously be aware and awake. Right. And just try. Yeah. You know, because you're not going to solve it. You can just try. Right. Right. Yeah. This is, and that's something you said to me recently that really stuck with me, is that when something is alive, it moves. And and
shout out Layman Pascal.
And life in that capacity, if you were to force it to be stagnant, you would be presupposing death upon it, because anything that's living, anything that has substance, is in motion. That's right. And that's even, for me, like, part of my initial desire for this whole thing was like, how can I figure out a system for myself such that I'm always happy? And it's like, well, if you're stuck in happiness, then like, what's happening? Like, you're just kind of, it's artificial, And so anything that is alive is moving and is flowing and is changing, and it's just learning how to move with it. Yeah. Yeah.
I have so much to say on that. And speaking of movement, I feel like I need to stand up for a second and like shake some energy out. Maybe use the restroom. Okay. What is that?
Go ahead. We can take a pause.
Take a little pause. If there's something, maybe there's something you would like to say just from you to the people at home. All right. And just see what comes out. Let me see. Let me just make sure it's still recording and we aren't out of space. Okay. Looks like we're all good. Okay. I'm going to use the restroom. I will return.
All right. All right. Ari's going now. First of all, thank you for, if you're still here, if you're still listening, I'm going to do one of these. Thank you for getting to this point. we've been rambling, I've been rambling, and I really appreciate the fact that you're still here and viewing this, or maybe you're not. Who cares? This is, you know, just as much for just us and being able to talk about these things, and I'm just incredibly grateful for you guys to be supporting Ari and what he does, and hopefully one or two words that we've said have some sort of impact on you all. I know that for me, in many ways, Ari has been an incredibly influential figure, and someone that's taught me that it's okay to branch out and be vulnerable and break convention, and just try. I think that's something that we lose track of pretty easily. It's just the fact that we're out here and we're trying, and it's okay to not know, and it's okay to forget and go off on a different path, but that just having that gusto that says I care, and it's a beautiful thing, and I think if you're watching this, you know, you've got that too, and so yeah, you know, I think it's an awesome thing. I feel like right now is when there should be like some sort of ad sponsorship, but yeah, he's back. Right when I was running out of things to say.
I was gonna come in like right out, and I was like, no. Okay. Amazing. I think we have some more juice in us.
Sure.
Amazing. Yeah, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed this.
First in-person one. Yeah, what's up with that? Eye contact. Crazy.
It changes the vibe so much.
Yeah.
It changes the vibe so much.
Yeah.
And it really allows for there to be a field, because otherwise it's like I can't really just hold space digitally as well.
Of course, yeah, it's
You know what I
impossible.
mean?
It's impossible to.
Whereas like I feel like I'm very much participating in this, even though I'm not saying anything. I'm just here, you know, basking in it and I'm loving it.
Mm-hmm. And it really changed like how I approach this, in the sense that like for a minute I was like, oh, like I should prepare, like I should like review these things that I've done, or like I don't know.
Right.
And then I was like, you know what? No, like let's just see where this takes me, and like let the field talk, and like if it's important for me to say, it'll come up. Yeah. And if it's not important for me to say, it won't. And like simple as that. Like you can't force it. Force it down. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just loving I'm just loving the perspectives you're sharing. I think they're so relevant and so helpful. And I think it's important to hold space like this, because for me to hold space like this, because like, you know, I don't think you write such amazing journal entries and things like this for yourself. And I think some of the, you know, I've seen philosophers and these sorts of types, you know, the type of people who are interested in this sort of thing or on this sort of journey, it tends to be kind of isolationist or a little bit alone. And there's so much wisdom that to us may be obvious, or we may be just throwing off to the side, but that could help other people. And even is just nice for us to look back on and say, oh wow, that is a good perspective. Maybe I've forgotten that later on. So yeah, I'm just glad we're doing this, and grateful for you to be here.
Absolutely. I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah. Do you want to pick back up on that question of movement and aliveness, or do you think there's something else that we're feeling?
Something that I actually literally just read yesterday, last night, that is regards that exact same topic, is the contrast between pleasure and thought. And it's something Jung was talking about, just that there is, and I think it's the same divide between thought and feeling, right?
It is, I think.
But he offered it on more of a microscopic level, where part of us is really drawn to thought, into forethought, into planning things out, to figuring out what life looks like. And then part of us just wants to cash out and just enjoy. And again, this is mama and papa.
That's right.
Or papa and mama.
Mm-hmm.
And he likens it to a snake slithering back and forth. That pleasure is the worst possible thing for somebody who's driven by thought. And thought is the worst possible thing for somebody driven by pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, it is both the poison and the remedy, because you need it to create that balance. And that what he ultimately provides, that life is just going back and forth and kind of just letting the pendulum swing until, you know, the swings don't get so crazy and they kind of start settling down, and you kind of really start honing where you need to think, when you need to feel, and gaining the intuition for that. But I thought it just tied nicely into what we're talking about.
Totally, yeah.
What was cool about it was that it for me, like, I'm terrified of snakes. Like, I do not fuck with snakes. Like Indiana Jones level. Like, I don't like those.
That's so
and see, that's a pop culture reference because it's Harrison Ford and George Lucas and Steven Spielberg.
Right.
But I always hated the snake, and in my mind, the snake, like archetypally and in terms of its mythical projection, was evil, was temptation. But there's, I think, a more refined perspective on it, that rather than evil, it's change.
The shedding of the skin.
It's the shedding of the skin. And it is the force that brings you to a new frontier. And in the same way, you know, Adam and Eve fell from the garden, they also gained consciousness. And so it's the fact that change in that capacity can be thought of as evil, but it's actually, you know, for your betterment as well.
Yeah, to me the snake is so just dark mama. It's just her, you know, and she is the thought of as, you know, the snake in the garden. Sometimes literally, sometimes Lilith is the snake in the garden, the devil. And also just that sliding scale makes me think of the sign of the cross. And some people say, and from a shamanic perspective, this is how you think of it, is that the vertical beam of the cross is like the levels of existence, so the dimensions, not necessarily the internal levels, but you could also think of it as the chakras or the dimensions, or the underworld, the middle world, the upper world, right? The subconscious, the conscious, and the superconscious, and that the positioning of the horizontal beam at the top or towards the top of the cross is saying, you know, we recognize the scales of this world, of hell and of heaven, and we're firmly planting our flag in heaven, that's where we want to go, that's what's ideal for us, and we're rejecting that which is lower, right? We're rejecting the body, we're rejecting pleasure, right? And we're thinking about how these actions are going to affect others, about if they make sense, if they're good. We're not just trying to feel them and do what is pleasurable now, but might be morally reprehensible.
Well, that's where you have the upwards cross with the snake slithering down it, symbolizing the snake's descent into darkness, and then that's the evil temptation part of the snake.
Right. There's
another popular biblical story of the downwards cross, where the snake is slithering up it, and what that signifies is rather that the snake, as much as it's sin, is also your savior, and will bring you to those dark places where you need to go.
Right.
And it will bring you into that descent. And so sometimes in your ascent, you need to look at the snake and say, not now, buddy, not now. But then sometimes in your descent, the snake is your greatest ally.
Totally.
And so there's that flip side of the two.
Right.
That's both necessary.
Yeah. It seems that there's a difference between the original Hebrew presentation of some of these ideas and some of the Christian presentation of these ideas. Like in the book of Job, you know, Satan or the devil or the adversary is not an equal deity to God. but is a servant of God. And the servant comes to God and says, the adversary comes to God and says, can I test your servant Job? And he says, have at him, I trust Job. But it's not the devil is tempting Job like with equal power to God. It's that God has a part of himself or a part of itself that tests us, that challenges us, that it may have attributes that we would consider seductive or violent or destructive, right? But that it is still a part of the unified one, and it comes as part of God's teaching. And the book of Job is this adversary testing Job, and Job ultimately keeping his faith. And there's a quote I love from it that I think of often, which is, I think it's 28:10, Job 28:10, and when you have tried me, I will come out as gold. I think the beginning of it is, for you know the way that I take, and when you have tried me, I will come out as gold. Like, you have this higher perspective, you see how the darkness plays into my journey, and you've already decided that. So I know you're trying me, but I know it's an alchemical process that's going to refine me, that's going to transform me into something better. And it seems like some of that is lost or is reinterpreted in the Christian orthodoxy later, and by the people that are interpreting it, by saying there's these kind of two equal adversaries. There's the tempter and the Holy One, right? And they're kind of in this war for your soul, and you need to just side with the Holy One. There isn't as much of this understanding that maybe some of these
they work together.
They work together and are part of one. And that's, I think, an issue we're having now, is that the intelligence of the Father does try and understand things, classify things, put things in the right place, right? This kind of left brain thinking. And that's what a photo is, right? It's trying to capture something as it is, not with all this messiness. But life also does have this messiness, and has this darkness, and has this wildness and fundamental mystery to it. And these are attributes I associate with the mother and the Earth Mother. And
it's interesting. I'm really just thinking this now, but it's that's been the pushback against social media, right? The pushback against social media is that people are just putting their ideal life out there, all the happy and everything, and so now there's these alternative influencers who are posting unedited and posting raw and the downsides and real life, and there is this innate understanding that the darkness is something that's there. It took social media, I think, to us to like aggressively promote the light,
right,
for people to be like, wait a minute, like this is so cap,
right,
and like now people are promoting like an edited dark, but but I think it's a reflection of almost, I think, what's happening on in the broader culture.
Totally. Yeah, I think the academics, some of the forward thinkers kind of understood the construction of narrative as being always kind of false, and you have people like Tarantino even making movies that have non-linear narratives, or that show the camera, even as early as the 80s,
breaking the fourth
wall. But for the average consumer to participate in that deconstruction of narrative in their own life, I don't think has arose until the last 10 years. Because maybe you go and you watch a great postmodern movie, but then in your own life you're not like deconstructing the photo album of your life. You're still telling the story in a linear way. But now I think because of social media, because of Finsta's having all these different personalities and parts of us, it's being challenged. And the upside down cross has become a popular symbol in culture. I mean, to the chagrin of a lot of people. But it's something you'll see on rappers' chains these days, on Playboy Cardi and his whole crew. It was big in the metal scene before. And this idea that we also recognize this hierarchy or this scale of existence, and we're firmly prioritizing the body, right? We're saying the emotions, the impulses, the feelings, that for us is holy and sacred, not the mind and rationality. And we want to side with mama kind of completely. Right?
It's just a swing of the pendulum,
Exactly.
And I think that's where I'm at in my evolution of this understanding, is swinging the pendulum back and trying to figure out, okay, I've lived in Papa for the majority of my life. I've now learned and have begun to understand mama. How do I swing it back the other way without overcorrecting again?
Right.
And that's really what integration is. And it's been a very difficult thing, but it's been a really beautiful learning process as well, and
Right.
and has, just as it's brought back old habits that I don't like, it's brought back old habits that have served me wonderfully.
Yeah.
Totally. And so learning that balance has been incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been amazing to see, personally, just watching it happen. Just seeing just over the past 2 years how deep you've been able to go into mama, and how much you've been able to integrate the feminine into your own life, and integrate the wisdom of the body and the emotions and the feelings, the lower chakras, or the lower rungs of the mind ladder, and just seeing those, and in many cases picking me up, like in the beginning of this video when I was coming in from kind of Papa land, Caregiver land, and you gave that burst of light, mama. It's just been amazing to see. And
but I think it's only been possible because I've given the energy to myself.
Given the energy
to myself.
What do you mean?
I mean that, and this goes back to like lifting yourself up, and when you hit bottom, what you do, what do you do? Just taking the time to be kind to yourself, and really how I see it, like the colloquial terminology I'll use for this journey is just learning how to become a really good friend to myself, learning how to be my own best friend, because for many points in my life I was like just mean to myself in order to get things done, or in order, like I think that's pretty common. Judgmental, demanding of why would you do that? Why would you think this way? Why would you mess up that like that? Like I used to stay up like at night, not be able to sleep at all if I like messed up a lacrosse play, or like
wow,
it would keep me up years later. Like I would like be up at night in college from like a turnover I had in high school.
Wow.
Because I was just so hard on myself, and it was an amazing trade, and it got me through a lot, but it also wasn't terribly kind. And so learning how to be a good friend, and I think, and that encapsulates it all, right? Like you're an incredible friend, and there are moments both where you've said, hey, like it's gonna be okay, you're gonna be okay, let's just like everything's gonna be okay. And there's also moments that you said, get off your ass, let's do this. And that's that same dialogue you gotta have with yourself, where when you just need to say, you know what, like let's take a second, we're gonna be all right, like let's do something, let's watch a movie tonight, let's take it chill, let's go into mama. And then there's also this idea that says, all right, son, time to get up and just start doing. And that's ultimately what, I think a very nice way to phrase this whole journey.
That's such a good way to say it. Because a good friend, I think, shows up for the other person in whatever state they're in. And when they're happy, you're there with them. When they're sad, you can comfort them. When they're bugging, you recognize that, and you can maybe provide some other perspectives. And I think it's something that Ken always says, Ken Wilber always says, like, everyone is right. And I think treating that, your psyche, in that same way, being like, all these emotions I'm having, all these perspectives I'm having within me, all these parts of me, they're trying to do something for me.
And even the negative, like even the ones that suck. Like a quote that I really like is true friendship is being willing to sacrifice the friendship for the friend. And meaning that if it's something that would truly benefit you, no matter what it is, I'll do it. Right. Even if that sacrifices our friendship. Because it's the best for you. And I think that's what's happening internally. Right. It's saying that I'm gonna cause you misery right now. Because it's what's better for you in the long run. And it's gonna alienate this part of me, and it's gonna be tough, but you need to learn this and you need to grow from it. And I think that's what you see. The physical pain is trying to tell you, hey, don't do that again. Or there's a sensitive part of us that is being damaged, right? Emotional pain, spiritual pain, mental pain is similar, right? Mental pain is, this idea we have, or this worldview, or this concept we have isn't serving us anymore, or it's being challenged by new information, and it hurts intellectually to wrangle with different viewpoints that disagree, right? Spiritually, it can hurt to wrangle with a different path, or a different, or surrendering into something that may seem, scary, same emotionally, right? So
they all have something to teach us,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not 100% right, and they're not 100% wrong.
They just are.
They're just a perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and it's taking that identification with the witness, or the
Mm-hmm.
one who can see them all, right? Who's friend to them all, because they may not be friends to each other, but there's part of you that's friends with all of them,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just the awareness or the witness.
Mhm.
That's what meditation helps with, and state
Mhm.
training helps with,
Mm-hmm.
psychedelics can help with. Trance or altered states of any kind can help you get, pull yourself out of one of the archetypes, or getting stuck in a corner of the psyche and coming back to the
Yeah.
center,
Yeah, and view it more objectively.
and then be able to integrate them.
Mm-hmm.
And on the note of archetypes, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's an archetype for you that you feel is very strong within you naturally? And what's the wisdom of that archetype that we could offer others? And then what's an archetype that you feel like is maybe different than the Fool, because we've already discussed him.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little bit weaker in you
Mhm.
naturally. And what's the wisdom of that
Mhm.
archetype that has been helpful for you?
Mm-hmm. I think a strong archetype in me that I didn't realize was that strong until I thought about it, and I was like, oh man, like this guy really runs the show.
Yeah.
Is the Outlaw.
Yeah.
I don't like being told
Yeah.
what is right and what is wrong. If somebody, like, even with like just like really anything, like if the crowd is doing it, like, that ain't me.
Right.
And I don't like following convention. I don't like following. I like have this voice in my head that says, like, if there's a lot of people doing it, it's probably wrong.
Right.
And
It's
I
like
think
intuition naturally since
part-
you're a kid.
part of me, I think that part of it's great. Part of it's like, there is wisdom in I think how people move sometimes.
That's right.
But I think ultimately the wisdom that it's offered me is that it's totally fine to go do your own thing. It's totally fine to stray from convention and to just live your own life. Like, that's something that I think crazily is so easily forgotten in this culture, is that, like, the life that we have is ours.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's things you got to do, and you got to go work or go
Right.
you
gotta
eat.
play
You gotta-
nice with
you gotta
the
play nice.
family,
Like, there's things you got to
friends.
do, but ultimately, it's your choice.
Right.
And if there's ever something that, and this is something Eckhart Tolle talks about, he says that you can either enjoy something, accept something, endure something, or not do it. And if you can't accept it, enjoy it, or endure it, then don't do it. And I think that's like, for me, like, that's where the Outlaw comes in, of being like, okay, like, I'm either gonna enjoy this, or okay, yeah, like, I'll make this sacrifice,
Right.
or like, screw it, I'll figure something else out.
Right.
And I've always instinctually lived that way.
Right.
And it's been my greatest blessing and greatest curse, and
Totally.
and yeah.
Yeah. That I have these memories from when we were like kids, and like all the kids would be like going one way, and you would be physically going another way.
Yeah.
But they'd all be laughing about something, and you'd throw in some curveball from the side.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was so great. And you'd always turn things that other people saw as negatives back against them.
Yeah.
They'd be like, "Cole, you're so short. You used
Yeah.
to be a lot smaller when we were kids."
Yeah, it's tiny.
And you'd be like, "And I can like get around you, or I'm faster than you." Like,
Yeah.
you always saw a blessing.
Well, and I think that's because I also had a healthy dose of magician.
Yeah.
So
Mr.
being
Transformer.
able to change your own opinions and perspectives.
But you were never fazed by the fact that
I was never fazed by
it
the fact
wasn't
that convention
conventional.
was against me.
Right, that
Yeah.
convention was against you.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes we refer to the outlaw as the destroyer,
Mm-hmm.
because like a wildfire clears way for new
Mhm.
growth,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes we have to be willing to actively destroy something, actively give it into the fire.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and yeah, I think the medicine of the outlaw is realizing so much of what we think is pre-given and that we need to do
Mm-hmm.
is actually just in our own minds.
Yeah.
And if we went a different way, other people, number one, wouldn't care that much,
No.
wouldn't maybe notice it,
Yeah.
and really it has nothing to do with you, what
Yeah.
their opinion of it
Yeah.
is a lot of the time.
I noticed it tremendously it really stuck out to me when I was in Patagonia, because on this trip there were 10 students and 2 instructors, and a lot of our hikes would be following like one student in the front, and they would trail lead, and then everybody would follow.
Yeah.
And like always, I was trying to be the trail leader because I was like, I'm here, like I want to be exploring.
Right.
And we had opportunities to take turns and lead.
Right.
But on the days that I wasn't, fortunately, like I had built up enough of a relationship with the instructor such that he trusted me and my survival skills, to where like I would just completely branch off from the group and just like make my own way down the mountain and then meet them at the camp. Like I'd be like, all right, camp's there, like I'm just going. One of the instructors hated me for it.
Yeah.
The other instructor was chill with it because he knew I'd be fine.
Mom and Papa.
But like I remember this one trek, like everybody was following this one leader, this trail. It was a nice, easy trek. I went my own way, ended up on a cliff, like scaling the cliff, like holding on to vines.
Oh shit!
Like it was a little bit hairy.
Yeah.
But I was loving it. I was having the best time, and I got to camp like right at the same time as them, and I was covered in mud and I was soaking wet because I was going through like a rainforest, soaking wet. They were just on a trail, so they were all like dry and nice and pristine. Soaking wet. I had like scratched my arm, so I was bleeding. Like by all traditional measures, I had failed. Right? Like my path was the stupid path to take. But I had the best time doing it, and it hit me in that moment. I was like, this is life, right? Like there's a lot of people following a trail that's gonna take them to the exact same spot I want to go to
at the same time. At
the same time, but I kind of just need to fall off this cliff, and like I kind of need to just fight through these bushes.
Yeah.
And just chuckle at how bad of decisions I was making, or how badly I should have gone right instead of left. But I was like, I'm here now. Like let's make the most of it.
Right.
And just that sense of like, of it was my choice.
Right.
Just held so much weight that it didn't matter that it was the wrong choice.
Right.
It was mine.
It was your choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen this with all of Dark Papa's subtypes, and Dark Papa, for everyone at home, is the part of our psyche, the corner, one of the 4 corners of our psyche that likes to do hard things and likes pain that is dark. So there's pain that is light, you know, like taking care of someone else or wrestling with hard emotional or intellectual problems, like the sage or the caregiver. But then there's pain that is dark, you know, like the warrior, the outlaw, these sorts of things. And I always, one of the things I think about Dark Papa is that Dark Papa always, the hairier it gets, the happier Dark Papa is. Like when David Goggins sees another person outpacing him, he's not like, fuck. He's like, hell yeah, you know?
Yeah.
And like Jasper sometimes, or Momo even, sometimes when I've seen them see like just something be super nasty, like a road that we're driving on, or some gym that we're going to do, or some cut that we're entering, and it's almost like there's an like inverse relationship between how happy they are and how like heinous it is.
Yeah.
And like the darker it gets, the happier they get.
You know?
Yeah. And I just love that. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then I think the flip side of that my least represented archetype, I would have said the Fool. Until recently, I've really been working to reintegrate the Fool.
He's coming.
Or
he's here, rather.
Man, I would. I'd probably say the Lover.
Okay.
I think I have a lot of Caregiver, but not as much Lover.
Yeah, I see that.
In the sense that
for sure. Do you want to break down what those 2 different types are for?
Yes, the Lover is kind of the pinnacle of Mama.
Yeah.
And that's dead south. Very in tune with feelings, very in tune with emotion. Just wants to just give love to everything and everyone around them. The Caregiver is a father reflection of the Lover that is more concerned with like they're gonna open the wound if they need to heal the wound, right? Like they don't care.
It's more of a doctor.
It's more of a doctor than a nurse. Yeah.
Right.
And so I have so much care for the people around me. Like I have so much love for the people around me, and it is, I think, my defining, really, like how I view myself is how I treat the people around me. That being said, I think lover and being in tune with my emotional capacity has been something I've learned a lot this past year that I hadn't had a typical relationship with beforehand.
Like even the thing you said, like sometimes a friend will sacrifice their friendship for the friend.
Yeah.
That would maybe be more of a caregiver take. Whereas like the
entirely
lover is
it's
usually
not
defined by
at all.
like it wants to hold on to something, even if it's tattered and like dying. It's like, well, it's mine.
Yeah.
And I love this thing no matter how it looks or what it's going. It's perfect the way that it is.
Yeah.
Whereas the caregiver is like, well, maybe it needs surgery.
Yeah.
Maybe it needs to be.
And the toxic side of that is like holding something so tight that you suffocate it.
That's right.
You know?
And
or being like the
doctor
helicopter
being
parent,
like,
or like
both of them have their shadow
Yeah.
aspects. But yeah, definitely both of them can derail. What do you think, if you had to say a little bit of the medicine that the lover has given you, what is that, how has that emerged for you?
I think it's emerged in as 4 has emerged.
Mm-hmm. Level 4 or
the
4th intelligence? Okay. Level 4 for everyone at home is the postmodern stage where you can recognize and hold and appreciate a panoply or a multitude of perspectives without trying to
suffocate.
Right. Yeah. To let each one breathe on its own terms.
Mm-hmm. I think that it's just like in many ways, like there's this culture, especially like in LA, where people won't think things are cool. Right, like I'm better than it. Like I don't need it. I don't need it. Like it's not that, like, oh, what you're doing, yeah, it's not that novel. Like I've already seen it. You know, like that lifts them up. Right. What the lover has enabled me to do, and it's part of it's being a fool because you're not caring about your reputation in this. Mm-hmm. Is it's just willing to be like, this is crazy. Like this is really cool, and I have so much like. I see the amount of love you put into this, and I love the fact that you love this. Mm-hmm. And in that capacity, I think the lover opens up just the ability to see people for trying and for giving effort, and really for me in this past year, because a lot of it's been in isolation, in solitude, seeing myself for the effort I give and for the love I want to give. Right. Yeah, it is the. On the wheel, and you can go on the wiki and look at the type wheel if you're interested, and we'll have content on this shortly. But the lover is opposite of the king, and is opposite of the papa types, because you know the papa wants what's best for us, wants us to grow, wants us to wake up and to get to the next level, but it isn't as interested in what's already here. Yeah. And what's already beautiful with what's happening here. Yeah. It always kind of has its eyes on the past and the future. Yeah. Whereas Mama is more interested in what's arising now. And the unlock for me was meditation. Because at the core, that's what, at least the style I do for Vipassana meditation. Vipassana meditation is insight meditation. And it's saying, okay, like this is what's happening in my body, but like, cool, let's just be here. And even if you're stressed, even if you're angry, whatever it is, you're not trying to evaluate what's solving it or what would solve it. Right. You're just saying, whoa, that happens, and then just sitting with it and saying, I love you all the same, and sitting with those negative emotions, and what that's allowed me to do is just be comfortable sitting in that space of not knowing and not having to know. Yeah, this is something that I think is important. Is, I mean, the reason why I've built all of the stuff on top of Integral is because it's recognized that, yes, holding these different perspectives cognitively is one thing, right? To recognize that pain has value, right? To recognize that, oh, that person has a completely different experience of my life. That's valid and true from a cognitive perspective. Okay, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. From a feeling lens. But from a feeling lens, can I actually hold that, right? And one of the ways I think about states, or what
meditation trains you to do is to actually be able to stabilize awareness enough that it can actually just hold that. It knows the validity of it, but even sometimes we know the validity of something, we don't have space for it because it's abrasive to us, and we say, oh yeah, that's great, but don't show it to me. Right? And oh yeah, other people can do that, but I don't want to look at it. What state training allows you to do is it could stabilize awareness to the point where that perspective that you already think is valid can actually be held in the field of awareness. And you know, even if you look at the archetype, we will say, oh, everything has something to offer me, great. You know, meditation allows you to actually be able to zoom out from your dominant archetype and say, oh, actually there's wisdom here from the lover, not in an intellectual or cognitive way, but in a way that can become embodied and integrated into the psyche. And yeah, they've been able to show that meditation is pretty much oil on the tracks for any sort of personal development, because just the more awareness and presence you have with what's arising, the more you're going to be able to weave it or to dodge things that or pull out of things that have their own kind of way of going. And yeah, so essential. And I think any robust healing practice or healing journey should have a really strong foundation first in kinesthetic practice, just getting in touch with the body and building a relationship with the body, and then a meditative practice, being able to hold.
And that's even like my meditation routine is I close my eyes and I typically just listen to solfeggio frequencies, like whatever frequency resonates with what I'm feeling or what I'm doing. There's a ton of descriptions online. And the first thing I do is just feel my breath. I just do just basic breath work, just trying to stabilize my breath, feel it coming in, feel it going out, and use that to transition into a body scan and work from my toes up through my ankles, through my shins, through my thighs, through my stomach, through my chest, down my arms, into my hands, all the way back up into my head, and kind of run through that cycle. And like, even that will be 20 minutes sometimes.
Totally.
Because like I'll get halfway through my shins. Next thing you know, I'm thinking about the newest. I don't know. I'm thinking about Dune and young Paul Muad'Dib, and then I come back to it and I'm like, oh damn, like I gotta keep going.
Yeah.
But just allowing that time to and I'm targeting to just stabilize and where I'm feeling my body, I'm feeling my breath, and I'm also listening to what's going on around me. Trying to stabilize at that level, but allowing the time just to give thought and energy to your body.
Yes.
Because the body is the one part of you that can never not be present. It's always in the present.
That's right.
It's always like your body can't be in the future, your body can't be in the past. What it's feeling like right now. And often what I found is like when I think about like even like right now, I hadn't thought about this whole time, but now that I'm thinking about the body, like I've got a lot of stress in like the arches of my feet. Like I should massage this out.
Right.
But like that's just been like stress that's like been there, like kind of actively influencing me this whole time.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't paying any attention to it. And so, you know, allowing myself time in the morning to really just like remind myself that through the body I can be present in this exact moment.
Yes.
And then through the breath I can link my conscious and my unconscious, because it's the one thing that you do both consciously and unconsciously. You weren't thinking about your breath, so I just said it, you know.
Very good.
And so doing that allows the barrier between your conscious mind and your unconscious mind to kind of thin a little bit, so that you're more aware of what you're just doing in the background without thinking about it. And so combining those techniques really serves a great presence or serves a great basis for presence.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah, that's so well said. Yeah, I think, you know, in the shamanic traditions, usually that kind of axis of reality, sometimes called axis mundi, or the spine of the world, or the world tree. If you think of it as kind of the world tree, the idea is that the kinesthetic sense, or the I one, what we call I one and ancestor, is kind of, they're the roots of the world tree, right? It's you're grounding into the present moment right now, right? The fact that you can just feel gravity, and like weight, on your body. You know, that's a way.
Reminds you that you're here.
Reminds you that you're here. That you're actually being held right now, and there's so many beings, living beings within you, that are and you know, pre-living beings that in the shamanic tradition we would still consider alive, like atoms, we would consider them alive, molecules, proteins. And for all the kids at home, if you watch a video or an animation of molecules, RNA, transcription, any of these things, just watch that video and let me know if you think that looks alive or not. We have this crazy belief that the lower levels of our being are somehow dead, and then suddenly, all of a sudden, with cells, things are alive. It's like, look at the way transcription is happening in a nucleus. It's like a completely animated, living process that's doing stuff all the time, super fast, way faster than we're living right now. It's completely alive. The only way to think of it's not alive is when you abstract it away with the cognitive intelligence and look at what's happening as a bunch of, you know, diagrams with numbers on them and lines. The real thing is this living process. And that's one of the ways that I think we were talking about postmodernity and multiple perspectives. And it can be easy to get lost in kind of, you know, maybe that's the heart world of realizing all these different perspectives, but going down into the body world of realizing, like, I'm a real thing. Like, perspectives are happening, but like I am actually in a body, and that body's here and now, and that body is really committed to staying alive, and it's been here for me this whole time. Let me put my roots down. The roots of my awareness are in my body, so let me awaken that first, and then move into these, work up from there. So I think, as strange as it sounds, just for me, getting in touch with my kinesthetic intelligence has been one of the biggest parts of my spiritual journey, because it's allowed me to come out of my emotions and out of my mind, and sometimes even out of the realm of spirit and what things mean, just down into
what's here right now.
What's here right now.
Yeah, absolutely. A metaphor that you gave me a while back was that any movie you watch, any form of content you watch, can be broken down into its pixels. In that we could recreate The Godfather right now, just based on just a series of numbers that correlate to frames, that correlate to scenes, that correlate to the movie. And this movie can be broken down into just ones and zeros. And then when you're looking at it from the 1 and 0 perspective, you're like, what is this? Like, what's the point of any of this? And then it's only by zooming out and actually watching the movie that you're like, oh, whoa, this is like a profound piece. But when you're so in the weeds of it, it doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't.
And so I think allowing yourself that grace to step back and say, wow, like, my struggle is actually beauty. And that has a lot of power. And I think that starts in the body.
I think you're totally right. I think it does start in the body. Okay. Something that has been very fruitful for us over the past few months is analyzing Dune. And we have a collector's edition over there. You know, I think Dune has been really powerful for both of us, and has been a myth and a narrative that's been special to us on our journeys. If you had to distill three medicines from Dune, 3 tools, you already mentioned the quote, so we can count that as a bonus, that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be experienced, right? Which I think is a beautiful analogy for the worm too, right? Kind of this thing that has its own power. Anyways, 3 things from Dune, and maybe I'll throw in some that come to mind after.
Man, one that jumps right off the top of my head, that's another quote, is fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. And just the idea that, like, you're not going to be able to get anywhere if you fear everything. And this is where the fool comes in, because the fool says, what's there to fear?
The fool's like Teflon.
Yeah.
Nothing can stick to the fool.
Nothing can stick to it. But,
the fool's like Gumby. He's just like,
he just bends.
He's just bent. The magician gets fucking drawn, quartered, and dismembered into atoms, and then reforges. But the fool is the manifestation of the light, and the fool shines regardless.
And so just you know, when you feel fear, thinking about it and saying, why do I feel this fear? Because often those are the moments where you're learning the most. The most difficult moments are the ones that are offering you the most to learn. because there's a reason you're reacting so strongly to them. And by going into those moments, that's where true healing is, because it's saying, okay, why do I fear this? Oh, I fear social rejection. Oh, what does it say about me? And then going into it rather than actually just being scared, you know.
Fear is
so
the
fear,
eye killer.
Fear's the
Like,
mind killer.
I know, but like fear is
it's
the
prohibits you from seeing.
Yeah, or like fear is the eye killer in the sense that fear is the thing that I think is me. Like
yes.
It's
The eye.
I'm afraid because I'm identified with something, and the fear is challenging that, right? And so it kills. It is the mind killer. It kills my perception, right? It kills my thoughts, my narrative about myself. But if you allow the fear in, you know, you expand, and that which is you comes to include the fear, and you become more resilient and anti-fragile. The fear is only possible because you're denying it, because you're afraid of what would happen. And of course, there's little versions of that in life every day. I think what spiritual practice or shamanic practice has given me to some degree is like when you see the real death, when you actually come out of your body and are not affiliated with the body at all, and say, whoa, there's a part of me that is not the body. There's a part of me that was here before the body, will be here after the body. When the body's afraid, you can see it as just that. You can say, oh man, my body is in danger, and I am not.
And I'm not. Yeah, exactly. So I'm surpassing that. Yeah. So I think that's one.
That's one.
Another, I just love Paul's arc of just the entanglement between fate and free will.
Yeah.
And I think it's done so well in the book. I think Denis does it incredibly well in both movies. Just the feeling of like, is he doing this, or was this done to him? And is his destiny inevitable, or can it be altered? And there's so many ways to spin it either way, and just the narrative of really feeling like, at least for me, how I interpret it, like he was always meant to be Muad'Dib, Lisan al-Gaib. Like, it was inevitable. Every moment, even the moments where he didn't want to be that and actively went against it, were necessary for him to become that.
Right.
And so it's that, for me, it gives that sense of faith that like your purpose or your destiny, even if you can't see it, even if the world doesn't make sense, everything that's happening to you right now is leading you to that moment. And obviously this is done in like a very cinematic and like grandiose fashion, and then Paul becomes the villain, but it's all to say that like just having trust that you're actually that guy going towards something. You just don't know what it is yet.
Right.
In hindsight, it's all gonna make sense.
Right.
But in foresight, you have no idea.
You have no idea.
And that's why I really enjoy actually the first movie more than the second one, because I think the second one's more fun, but the first one, Paul's making all these small decisions that you don't know where it's gonna lead forward, but once you've read the book, seen both movies, you're like, that's like so influential to his story, where like that one little hinge point was necessary, or that one hiccup was necessary. And it's I think it's really cool to almost like review the film of like the setup after you know the conclusion.
Right. It's well said.
And then I think it's kind of along a similar arc, but just the amount of effort that went into the movies, artistic effort, resonates with me on such a profound level, because every scene is given so much attention in it, and it's one of those movies that you can push against and it pushes back at you with double the force, right? And
you uncover the layers. There's actually something for you there.
There's actually something for you there, where you're not just seeing the action. You're like, oh, that's cool. It's like, wait a minute, like, why did he do that, or why is that shot from that angle, or why? And going, there's so many behind the scenes videos on YouTube that I like 1,000% recommend. Where like, I was just watching one about how the scene where he gets on the sandworm, like Denis wanted the shot to be where he's running in the shade, but the sun's behind him. To symbolize he's the consciousness is in the past, and he's jumping into something unknown, he's jumping into the darkness. But due to the weather patterns in the desert, that exact dune didn't exist. And so they built the whole dune. And they built up this massive sand dune, and then they wanted all practical effects for it to feel more real. So they buried trucks in the dune and then drove them out while the guy's running on it, so the stunt double falls. And like,
wow,
all of these details that go into like a 5-second scene that you're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But like the minute you like push on it at all, it's like, actually,
right.
there's all of this behind that. And
Yeah.
like even like just like the sets they use, like you see a lot of characters walking through moon doors, the circle, you know, and that's from Chinese culture and symbolizing change, and all of these, like everything is given some sort of play,
right.
and down to the costume design, down to the set design, down to the cinematic experience in Hans Zimmer. Like, to me, it's a complete movie in that capacity.
Yeah. It's a great metaphor. I have something to say to the second one and something for the third one. I'll start with the third one, which is that I think something that I think about a lot is like there are some fundamental limits in life. Like, for example, I can only taste so many flavors in my mouth at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Or like we all have so much going on inside of us, but we only have one mouth that we can talk, and we
right.
can only talk in these linear ways,
mm-hmm.
right? Or there's only 24 hours in a day, or
mm-hmm.
some of these just game constraints that we have
mm-hmm.
on us, right? Like a book is always made out of words,
mm-hmm.
right? But I think what and a movie is a certain amount of hours
mm-hmm.
of the same,
mm-hmm.
you know, MP4 file,
yeah,
right? But there's a difference in the depth.
Yes.
Right? That
yes.
someone
exactly.
we could talk for 3 hours, maybe to someone this is really interesting, maybe to someone it's not. You know, but like a movie can be made, the same 2-hour, 3-hour movie can have that level of depth where
mm-hmm.
every scene is considered, every outfit is designed,
yeah.
or it can just be thrown together.
Yeah.
And I think part of growing up is discerning, you know, how much depth does this thing really have?
Mm-hmm.
And is this something, is this someone,
mm-hmm.
is this an experience, is this an idea that's going to reward me engaging with it?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it kind of a facade and going to fall over when I start pushing it?
Yeah.
And learning how to plumb the things that are, you know, the same length, the same book, but maybe rereading it 5 times because it really does reward each
mm-hmm.
each rewatch or
mm-hmm.
re-listen, as opposed to listening to a bunch of shit, but every part of it is a tenth of the work that something else was.
Yeah. But then even in that, because I found myself feeling this bias where like I'll watch a movie that isn't as like well thought out after and like be judging it.
Right.
And then learning from that too.
Totally.
And being like, wait, like why don't I like this? Like why isn't this resonating with
mm-hmm.
me? And like from those I've learned just as much. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. And each level has something to teach us.
Yeah.
Each amount of complexity is nice, and sometimes you need to just see something that just is what it is and doesn't have any deeper
100%.
meaning. And then the thing I'll say about the second one about free will, it's one of the things I love about it is I think a disease that I've had that I think is shared by a lot of modern people and postmodern people is postmodernity understands that to some degree everything is constructed,
mm-hmm.
right? And modernity believes that we are kind of doing the cool stuff,
mm-hmm.
the stuff that matters, right? Technology, we have the ability to change the world, change our lives. Humans are the ones that are in control in some sense, right? And postmodernity takes that actually even further, and it says, yeah, humans are actually constructing culture entirely, constructing what we think of as reality,
mm-hmm.
right? There's nothing that exists besides perspective
mm-hmm.
itself. And something that I think I've had to go down and remember from indigenous wisdom traditions, and even just, you know, to not get too deep into it, just the part of my being that is still indigenous,
mm-hmm.
right? I think we can get lost and say, yeah, I haven't studied with anyone in person of
mm-hmm.
those lineages, but the part of my body that is indigenous and that is part of the natural world,
mm-hmm.
right? That's why I call myself a shaman, because I'm learning a lot from that level, even if I'm not learning from a specific person
mm-hmm.
who's from a lineage in that level. And from the traditional level or the mythic level, right, is they are very aware of these forces that are beyond us and that are bigger than us, and they hold a lot of space for those phenomena, right? And I think something that you can forget when every food item you've eaten has been so heavily created by another human being and prepared by another human being and grown, raised by another human being, and every piece of technology you interact with is like this little cathedral that 1,000 people have collaborated on. And you know, everything is so constructed and so artificial. It's so amazing because it's complex and it's useful in a lot of ways, but it's also so human and it's so anthropocentric in a sense, in that it's just a reflection of us. And one of the things that I think Dune holds space for, not only in its narrative but also in its world, is there are these forces that are non-human, right? The Shai-Hulud, the worms, right? The rhythms of Arrakis. Arrakis is really a character in Dune, right? And its conditions,
the weather,
and how we have to adapt to its conditions, its uncompromisingness, right? And these beings that have their own agendas and need to be summoned, but riding them is a tenuous thing, and you can be killed by the riding of it. They can dive, at, you know, right? And I think that's so different from, you know, something like Terminator is a myth about something that we've created turning its back on us, right? Or there's these modern myths of technology going out of control, these Promethean myths, right? Or Frankenstein myths. But Dune is tapping into a lower layer of reality, which is saying, yeah, there's things that we didn't create that we have relationships with. There's things that have their own breath, their own life, that we did not breathe into them.
And then it talks about the interplay between those and the things we created with the prophecies, and so
that's right,
how they relate.
And then
that's the fundamental struggle of a lot of life,
right?
Is figuring out what is in our control and what's not in our control, and how to grapple with faith and
action,
free will,
or
and destiny, right? And how they interline. And that's kind of the crux of it. I think honestly, on that note, thank you. If you are still here listening, or maybe you just skip to the end to see us finish it out. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for hanging out with us and for listening to us babble and chat.
Yeah.
And hopefully you gain something, or you've got something to push back against us with.
Yeah.
And
yeah, please let us know. You know, I've never gotten a comment before, so if you make a comment, you'll be the first comment that's ever been made on this channel.
Yeah, how about that?
And let us know what resonated, what you want more of, if there's any topics that we could go into at a later date, if there's something that was unclear, something that you want to push back against, feel free to add anything, even just a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Still figuring out how to do this and what's going on, so appreciate your engagement and your being here. And Mr. Cole, thank you, bro.
Of course.
Playground number 3, or Playroom number 3. Number 3 in the bag.
There we go.
Alrighty. Bye, everybody.
Oh.